And now, it's time to break down the Cougars.
Give me everything you got right now.
This is your Cougars Daily Update with JJ and Alex on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
All right, what's up? Welcome back. JJ and Alex, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Alex Keary, Jeremiah Jensen. Going to get Mitch Harper on in just a couple of minutes here as we chat about what the top 100, the latest of his list on top of, I mean, look, this is not an undertaking that any of us want to have to do. But,
No,
I say any of us. Mitch, this is exactly what he does. And he does it phenomenally. So, numbers 1 through 25 are up. They're live. And we'll get Mitch on here with us to chat about it. First of all, our program is brought to you by G2G Bars. All natural ingredients and no preservatives make the G2G Bar perfect for anybody who needs a quick, tasty, and nutritious boost. So there you go. You go to Holiday Oil, Maverick, Costco, popping up at the Associated Foods and Smith's near you as well. So go take a look at it for the G2G bar. All right, so let's jump in. Top of the hour, as we always do, we get to the cut. Let's jump in here and let's talk about the top 100 players of all time at BYU. Let's do it.
It's time for the biggest story of the day. This is what made the cut with JJ and Alex on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Go over to KSLSports.com right now, and you can find yourself a list of the top 100 of BYU's players, and it is 1 all the way down to 100. Okay, the reveal today, of course, by Mitch Harper of the top 25. Let's go through some of those numbers very quickly before you get Mitch on, and then we'll have to do some splaining, okay? So here's what number 25 looks like. Harvey Unga. For a long time, when I say a long time, for a chunk of time was the leading rusher in BYU history. Harvey Unga was a guy who I think he came into BYU. He was the very first when I was actually working and covering BYU. He was the first running back. When I'm working this job, and I got spoiled, and I think a lot of folks got spoiled watching Harvey Unga. By the way, a totally different back than we had ever seen at BYU, right? When it comes to being that number one running back with the body of a fullback, but the speed of a tailback, it was something like we had never seen before. Harvey Unga definitely in that conversation for one of the best running backs of all time at BYU.
But not the best.
No.
Would you put him ahead of Jamal Willis?
Okay, now you're already getting into the complaining territory. I'd say yes. Yeah, I'd say I'd put him ahead of Jamal Willis. Yeah, why not?
Okay.
34.55 was his total of rushing. Average 5 yards a carry. Now, he was replacing Curtis Brown, who was the all-time leading rusher at that point, and he wasn't even a guy who people looked at and thought, no, he could end up getting that job. Ended up being in the NFL for a handful of years. He is, of course, now he's still BYU's running back coach, isn't he? Yeah. Okay, so there you go. Harvey Unga, number 25. Number 24, tell me if this is too high or too low. Jaron Hall, quarterback for BYU out of Maple Mountain High School. Thoughts?
Not a problem with that. No, it's fine. He had a good run. Couldn't always stay healthy. Probably would have been higher on the list if he had played more games. But the win over Utah was obviously a pretty significant win, considering the circumstances for a BYU quarterback. That fans and the program needed that win badly, and he made it happen at Rice-Eccles Stadium.
I will have people remember, too, that it wasn't just that Utah win that year, although that's the biggest one, certainly for BYU fans. But that was that stretch of years, or that was that stretch of a couple of years where BYU owned those Pac-12 schools that they were playing, right? I mean, in that year especially, everybody made it. It was like, they were Pac-12 champs. You remember all those T-shirts and everything? All right.
Yep.
Leon White, number 23, linebacker for BYU between 1982 and 1985. Finished with 250 tackles. Now, Leon White being at 23, I know that you'll probably wonder, then why are we talking about Rob Morris being number 32? Isn't that what he was on the list?
Yeah, there's not that big of a gap.
Should Leon White be ahead of Rob Morris? See, the problem is that
no,
he's not.
But Leon was really, really good, and he was on that 1984 team, and that 1984 team probably doesn't win some of those games if Leon White isn't as good as he was.
Okay. Now we start getting into a territory where we start having a little bit of an argument. You ready?
Yeah.
Tyler Algier, number 22.
Would you put Tyler Algier ahead of Harvey Unga and Jamal Willis?
Probably not.
Okay. But
probably not. He is. 1,600 yards rushing. 1,601 gave him the all-time single-season record for a BYU running back,
which is significant. And he's
I
great.
think we all knew this guy was absolutely lights out as a running back and overperformed compared. He was one of these guys that was asked to change positions, right, when he came in?
Yeah.
And then asked to change positions again back to running back. So that's a guy that people, I think, look at and go, all right. Tyler Algier, for me, like if you were to ask my kid, absolutely, because he was phenomenal. He was electric. He was out of the box, one of the best running backs you'd ever seen. And he had a lot of those same Harvey Unga qualities, right? But not as many yards rushing.
He had the best individual rushing season in BYU history, but not the best career. So I could not put him ahead of those other guys. So I would have to make an adjustment there. I would have Tyler Algier behind those guys. And there's one significant running back who is ahead of him, but I can't put him ahead of Unga and Jamal Willis.
Well, so there's one that, you might have a look at and go, I don't know what's going on with that guy. All right, number 21 on the list. I like going through these because the top 25 a little bit more significant, right? Kyle Morrell, absolutely deserved. All-American. Was he the WAC Defensive Player of the Year once or twice? It was at least once. I know it was at least once.
He was an All-American.
All-American.
And he made one of the greatest plays we've ever seen that saved BYU's 1984 season.
Doesn't make that play, BYU's not a national champion.
Think how much different BYU football is if he doesn't make that singular play. But he wasn't just one play. He was an All-American player.
Yes, he was.
But even then, is he a better all-time defensive player than Rob Morris?
WAC Defensive Player of the Year twice was Kyle Morrell. Okay, now the big uglies get a little bit of representation, and this one's probably deserved. How about John Tate?
Yep, no problem with that.
Number 20 all time. One of the best recruits that they landed of all time at offensive line, but also ended up being every bit of what he was billed as, and so that was a huge deal. Speaking of offensive linemen, Mo Elowinibi. One of your 2 Outland Trophy winners. I don't have a problem with that.
He might actually be underrated.
That's
here.
Exactly right. Could probably deserve to go a little bit higher.
And I think part of the problem is you're judging his failed professional career. But he won an Outland Trophy. He was the best lineman in the country in 1989. So if you win a national player, it's kind of like Luke Staley, right? He won a Doak Walker. You can't put him 25th.
Yeah, but also was one of those guys, and this was an argument you made earlier, was like, hey, what about these guys who only do 2 years at BYU? Can we put them that far up the list when they have a singular season like him?
You're going to penalize Jason Buck for only playing 2 years at BYU?
I'm not going to penalize him. I'm just saying that was an argument that you used before. I'm just trying to point out some of your flawed logic over here, brother.
Flawed logic?
Flawed logic?
Elowinibi won an Outland.
I know. One player ahead of Mo Elowinibi is Zach Wilson at 18. Wilson, one of the nation's best quarterbacks in 2020, passing for 3,692 yards, 33 touchdowns, and 3 picks. I think we all know that was an insane season. Also, I think you'll remember when he was that true freshman, we can't forget the 18 for 18 game against oh boy, who did they play? One of the directional Michigan schools, right?
Yeah.
Was it Central Michigan or was it Western Michigan?
I think it was Western. In the bowl game?
In the bowl game up in the Potato Bowl.
Yep.
18 for 18, right? Zach Wilson at 18, your thoughts? Because immediately just based off of the guys who are on the list, I almost would have a guy like Harvey Unga ahead of Zach Wilson.
Or Rob Morris.
Or you and your Rob Morris. Listen.
Or Fred Warner, who was in the mid-30s.
Maybe even Sark, right? Joining us on the
who had a better quarterback tenure at BYU? Who had the most impact, Sark
I don't know.
or Zach?
All right. Joining us on the program right now to defend himself against Jeremiah Jensen's accusations, Mitch Harper, our BYU insider for KSLSports.com. Mitch, congrats on putting together a ridiculously difficult list to put together, man.
Thanks. It was a lot of fun putting together this list, and it was something that I wanted to do with this being the 100th season, and took on the project. And I've garnered some criticisms from some former players about where they landed, or if they didn't land, or how high or low. But it's been a lot of fun. I think it's one of the great things about having the debates. So it's been a lot of fun.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to ask what the number one. I guess what's the number one person that is getting you the most reaction of, I think you didn't put him up high enough? Because I would assume you're getting some of that reaction.
Well, today I think some of the reaction, surprisingly, and I don't know why it's kind of been this way, but a few people have expressed that Puka Nacua was too high. And to me, Puka Nacua was someone that there was a real case that he was the best receiver ever at BYU. I think the only knock on him was that he just wasn't, clocking in, clocking out for long enough to maybe unseat someone like an Austin Collie at BYU, who I believe was the best receiver in program history. But, Puka, in his short period at BYU, 2 seasons, and yes, there were injuries, but, man, his talent was undeniable to where he was, even Kalani Sitake said, one of the best players in college football. And we know Kalani, he never says commentary like that. But, so that has been something today. But I think also, too, the quarterbacks, when with BYU, it's always tied to the quarterback position, and 17 quarterbacks are in this top 100, and many of which are in the 1 to 25 range. And it highlights the importance of the position and why BYU, the last 50 years is top 10 in wins in college football because of the success they've had the last 50 years at that position. That's why they've had a lot of consistency and a lot of good teams. And that was really hard to put, where some of those quarterbacks lied on that list.
You mentioned some former players actually reached out to you and had some thoughts on this. I'm not asking you to out any of the players, but what were their complaints about themselves, or was it other guys they played with?
Oh, one player that was kind of a thorn in the side for the ranking, and even our KSL Sports Live colleague Sam Farnsworth was not happy about it either. Was Eric Drage? Felt that was too low. Having him at, I believe I had him at 58. Look, Eric Drage was intense. He played way beyond his measurements and was outstanding at BYU. He's big time. He's a top 100 player. top 60. But you compare him to a Puka or an Austin Collie or a Cody Hoffman. I think that you just stack them up, and I don't think there's much comparison. And look, it's splitting hairs. There are so many great players, and you're factoring different eras too. And I think one of the things that I look at too, and some could say it's a little bit of recency bias. I disagree, but BYU's had some of their best football players in the last 25 years in the 21st century. And it makes you kind of wonder, has BYU football severely underachieved, since the 2000s began? Because, you look through some of the names that have rolled through here, and what's like the big crown jewels that they point to? That I think that's one of the things that they've had impactful seasons, individual seasons, but maybe not winning at the highest level. Maybe that's a byproduct of independence, where you were chasing maybe ghosts. You didn't know what you were really chasing. But I think that there's been some really good football players that have rolled through BYU in the 21st century, and there was amazing players in the 80s and 70s, and even when they first started it 100 years ago. BYU football has had some really impactful players, not only by BYU standards, but in college football at large, guys that have really reinvented maybe positions or rewrote the record books. BYU's got a lot of players that have, inserted themselves into the national conversation. I think that's what makes this list, compared to a lot of programs, so much fun, is that they have, despite being a school primarily in small conferences, they've had a lot of players that have put a dent in the national scene.
I got one more question about this list, and because I've been talking about it on the show.
He's got a number one beef with you. He's got a number one beef.
I got one that rubbed me wrong, that got me a little bit. So it's in the 30s. So most people probably be arguing about the top 5 or 10. I'm arguing about the 30s. Mitch had a hard time with Ziggy Ansah being ahead of Rob Morris, Fred Warner, and even a Brady Papinga or a Jan Jorgensen. How did you decide to put Ziggy ahead of those guys?
Ziggy Ansah, his talent is undeniable. I mean, the man stepped in replace of an Ethan Manumaliuna, and it's insane to think that he wasn't going to play until Ethan got injured. We would have never seen his greatness. But I mean, you talk about sheer pass rushing ability. There's no one better, arguably, than Ziggy Ansah. I mean, what he did. I mean, he was outstanding in those 9 games in 2012, and a big reason BYU was the 3rd best defense in college football, behind only Bama and Notre Dame, 2 teams that played in the national title that year, was because of the pass rush that Ziggy Ansah and the pressure that he created up front. I mean, he was elite, and his measurements, the body size, I mean, everything. He just the complete athlete. And I think, this was one of the goals I had with this list, was to highlight those unique stories of players that maybe didn't have a full 4 years, because, we look over the next, I guarantee in the next 25 years, we're going to have to size up list the greatest of all time in that regard, where you're sizing them up in 1 year, 2 year increments in the transfer portal era. That's what it's going to become. It's no longer just the 4 year players are going to always be viewed as the greatest. And Ziggy's impact was undeniable. Without him, they still had good players on that defense with Kyle Van Noy, and there were some really good secondary players, but he was the key to really elevating how good that defense was. And I just thought his star power, and I thought that, his impact was just, it's so unique at that position too. I think that was something that really stood out with, you don't find defensive ends like that at BYU. He's one of one in BYU history, and there's not many guys on this list that you can say are one of one. And that's what put Ziggy in high regard for me.
How did you weigh overall talented guys, the freaks like Ziggy, like Puka Nacua, with the guys that had the overall better career resume, like Tyler Algier over Harvey Unga, or how did you make those decisions when you were making this list? When some of these guys who had much better statistical careers or accomplishments, you picked the guy that had maybe the better measurables or the athleticism in those cases, or were taken higher in a draft?
I think a big part of that too was the level of competition, and some of that was not, in favor of maybe some of the guys in the 70s and 80s and 90s. They had no control over that. Someone like Ziggy, he was lining up against, Notre Dame, and he was one of the best teams in the country, and he looked like the best football player on the field. So you had a high bar of, seeing them against the nation's best. Taysom Hill, that's another guy that, kind of drew some controversy today, being above Robbie Bosco. Taysom Hill, even though he suffered a lot of injuries in his BYU career, I mean, he was doing it against the Texases. That 2013 team where he played the entire year, that's one of the 5 toughest schedules in BYU football history. And, he managed to somehow put together an 8-win campaign despite a lot of limitations on that roster. Him and Jamal Williams together, that go fast, go hard offense they had, they were dynamite. And it kind of, he had individual performances against Houston in 2013 where he's doing things that no one in college football has ever done. So I think that, that was a big thing too, was that, the type of competition you faced, or if you are facing the weaker competition, the sheer dominance of those of that individual performances week after week, whether it be a season or 4 years. Those are some of the things that played a part in deciding this list.
I'll go through real quickly here the top 10 just so people can kind of get up to speed here. John Beck, number 10. Number 9, Gifford Nielsen. Number 8, Gordon Hudson. Number 7, Jason Buck, the highest-rated defensive player on the list there at number 7. Certainly deserved with the Outland Trophy and just being the insane force that he was when he played at BYU. Max Hall, number 6. Number 5, Luke Staley. Number 4, Mark Wilson. Number 3, Steve Young. Number 2, Jim McMahon. And number 1, Ty Detmer. Getting a lot of people go. I wouldn't argue at all with the top 5. I feel like those are the ones that are ones that you could maybe argue with the least, but I would assume that people are still maybe wondering where you have a Mark Wilson versus, maybe even Luke Staley or even Max Hall. But on this list, though, this top 5 and this top 100 overall, is there a guy on the roster at BYU right now that could be in that top 100 or maybe even top 50 or even top 25?
Tyler Batty could be that, but he's got to have the production, the stats. I didn't try to make it focus solely on stats, but I think for him, he's got to deliver on that front. There was a stat coming out as far as I think the last day or so from Pro Football Focus about quarterback hurries, and he's among the top returning players in quarterback hurries and pressures in college football among Power 4 conference players. So he's got the ability. We've seen flashes, but he's someone I look at. Maybe Jacob Robinson too, because you factor impact plays that he's made with pick sixes, interceptions in his 3 years so far. He could be a candidate. Maybe if you wanted to go, kind of wild card, and it's more projection based right now, Chase Roberts potentially at wide receiver, but I think that's a reach at the moment. When you talk about the receivers that are on this top 100, he's not anywhere close to being in the same breath as these receivers that have cracked into this top 100 right now. But again, projection, if he, stays around in these 2 years at BYU, maybe he could be that guy, and you do it against the Big 12. That kind of is a feather in the cap that no one else really on this list can really hold. So there's a few guys, but not many. And I think that's why when the wise guys in the desert are saying 4.5 wins for BYU, it's because of that. You don't have that program superstar that really kind of resonates with BYU football right now. I mean, and I might be reaching a little bit when I say Jacob Robinson and Tyler Batty and Chase Roberts. I think Cougar fans listening to this might go, those guys aren't anywhere near the Jason Bucks, the Sean Knights, the cornerbacks of the past for BYU. So, it's a lot of work, and BYU's going to have to develop from within and try to really take some leaps forward with some of their personnel this year and in the years to come to have players that could, be in this top 100 going forward. Because one thing that this current program has that's difficult is that you don't necessarily have an identity of who you are year after year, despite the names changing and the players going in and out with Lavelle and to a lesser extent with Bronco and early years of Kalani. You kind of knew who these teams were year after year, but now in the Big 12, you're trying to form your identity, and you got to have some star power emerge to develop that identity, and then those guys can maybe be in that top 100 in the future.
Mitch Harper, BYU Insider, KSLSports.com. You can go check out the full list. It's all up. 1 through 100 as we celebrate the 100th year of BYU football. And in fact, we're now inside of those 100 days officially before BYU kicks off their season. Mitch, as usual, thanks for joining us, man. We appreciate it.
You bet. And tomorrow, the mark the 100 days, I'll have some of the key questions heading into the season. So look out for that on KSL Sports.
Awesome. All right, might have to hit you up again. There's Mitch Harper, everybody. All right, let's take a break. Did you get some answers there?
Yeah,
Mitch can defend everything. I know, but I love.
Let me say, I respect the heck out of Mitch for putting this list together. And you're never going to make everybody happy. But the great thing about these kind of things is it really does spark discussion and debate in a fun way, and it's very enjoyable. So it was fun to watch that list be unveiled. And I disagree with that. I thought you need to weigh career accomplishments over how freakish an athlete somebody is, right? Otherwise, Taysom Hill would be number one. There's never been a greater athlete at BYU on the field that could do what he does than Taysom Hill, right? I mean, maybe Luke Staley, but Luke Staley couldn't stay healthy. The greatest athlete at BYU ever is Taysom Hill. He's not the greatest quarterback. There's a difference. Yeah. So you have to. It's tough to make these lists and come up with it because you're comparing defensive players with the quarterback. He's right. The quarterbacks are always going to have the higher ratings,
and they are on this list as well. But I think he honored the guys who did a really
I'd put
really
Harvey
good job.
Unga ahead of Tyler Algier. I'd put Jamal Williams ahead of some of those guys. Your all-time leading rusher can't be 17th.
I don't think.
But maybe he can. I don't know.
Here's the really depressing part. I don't see one guy on this roster that would crack that top 100.
Not yet.
Maybe if Ben Bywater has a phenomenal season too.
It would have to be phenomenal.
But I mean, like even then, he's going to have. But I mean, he's going to have maybe almost 400 tackles.
It gets
by the end of
tougher as time goes on because this list is really, really good.
Yeah.
They've had some great players at BYU, and if you want to become one of the all-time greats, you've got to accomplish something pretty significant. But we have seen guys recently that made it. Tyler Algier, Puka Nacua. These are recent guys. Zach Wilson, Jaron Hall. So we'll see. Somebody could emerge.
Let's take a break. We'll come back. Tons more to jump into. If you have an issue with Mitch Harper, you can hit him up on social media. But as if people haven't been doing it, right?
Hey, Mitch, you know what grinds my gears?
Yeah, people. I mean, Mitch is confident enough. And by the way, I don't know anybody who knows more about BYU than Mitch Harper.
Nope. If you're looking for a BYU source of information,
honestly,
he's your guy.
Maybe Greg Wrubell, who is another person I worked closely with here during his years when he was here. But he has the advantage.
But they work in different capacities.
Yeah, and he has the advantage of being the play-by-play guy now for the football team since 19 or I mean, what was his first full year? 2000.
Was it 97?
97 is when he came in and filled in.
Oh, no. It was 2000.
It was 2001.
No, it was 2000.
2000.
So 2001 was his first season as the full-time play-by-play voice because
Paul James
retired after the 2000 game with
right.
Lavelle.
Now, he went in and filled in for the addled Paul James during that Cotton Bowl. Remember that? That was a big deal. Ends up having a minor heart attack. Paul James still wants to do the game, and everyone's like, maybe we sit this one out. And a
legend.
A 19-year-old Greg Wrubell, maybe? No,
Yeah.
It was definitely like very on the edge of just barely graduating college.
Young Greg Wrubell.
Very young.
And look at him now.
Yeah. Again, Mitch Harper, I'll put his knowledge about BYU stuff up against anybody. All right?
He defended everything I asked him.
I know.
He had a case.
I love. Okay. We'll take a break. We'll come back. We got more to go around the corner. You're okay with Ty Detmer being number one?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, me too.
He won a Heisman Trophy.
Yep.
Who else did? Nobody.
No, but you'll have people argue between McMahon and Steve Young. There's been a couple of those people coming out and going, oh, you swapped McMahon and Young.
They didn't win the Heisman Trophy.
Nope. All right, we'll come back. More to go around the corner. 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Imagine a family-friendly cruise where you didn't have to worry about the drunk spring breakers ruining the memories you're trying to make with your kids. Well, BYU fans, that dream has become a reality and a blessing. Introducing Cruising with the Cougars 2025. Cruising. Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines, known previously for their debauchery on the high seas, is making an all-inclusive Cougar-centric cruise in 2025 for only the most dedicated BYU fans. Relax. In a modestly dressed hot tub and pool environment where you don't have to worry about anything except for maybe what the refreshments you want to dine on will be next. Sail away. From creepy Utah fans who never know when to quit harassing you about the honor code. Join head football coach Kalani Satake.
If you would have told me when I was a little kid that the team that I was rooting for was going to be in a
floating fan bus in the middle of the Pacific,
I would have just thought, no way. And now we're here. And then not only are we here, and now I'm the head coach. So you can imagine the dream that I'm living right now. And nobody pinch me. I'm not ready to wake up yet.
Jimmer Fredette, Cosmo, and other favorite Cougars, former BYU legends Matt Barry, Jake Heaps, and former defensive back Dallin Levitt, the viral sensation Cougar Tail face-stuffing kid from the basketball games, and many more as you wind your way up the Mexican Riviera. No need to worry about dysentery, as the food will be both nourishing and strengthening. When you can't afford season tickets anymore, join us for Cruising for Cougars 2025 on Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines. I don't think you can call it Cruising for Cougars, all right?
Where do I sign up? I just want to meet the Cougar Tail kid.
Now, you might be asking yourself, why are we getting this ad right now? Well, it's because, one, they keep being sent out to Cougar Nation every other week. And the newest addition to the party bus, the floating party bus, our own Hans Olsen.
Oh, I feel bad for the buffet.
No, I was going to say, fans are going to love it. You know why? Because Hans is going to get into that hot tub, and he's gonna spread those legs, and he's going to go, hey, excuse me, how you guys doing?
Dude, Cougar Nation's not ready for Hans Olsen on a party cruise.
I love it.
Not ready. You're not
I
ready.
can't believe this is what we got to get. We got to get Hans on the horn here in the next couple days. Because, by the way, I just love it too because we know he's a frugal dude, right? So I guarantee they probably approached him, and I bet 19 Olsons are going to be on that cruise for free.
No doubt.
And the cruise is better for it, all right? You just improved the cruise fun factor by, I don't know, 10? Absolutely. So Hans Olsen, he's going to be on the cruise too.
And he's
Go
bringing
check
his
it out.
friends.
I think somebody pointed it. Did I point this out to you last time? Or maybe it happened since then. There's a Utah fan who, if you lose their fantasy football league next year, you have to go on this BYU cruise.
Oh, that's perfect.
Isn't that amazing?
That's just perfect.
Oh, I don't care how much it is, Jeremy. Don't ask that question when you're
That's
trying to
also
pull
a
something off
penalty.
like this. Come on. Insane. Wild. All right. Where were we?
Top storylines and questions to be answered for BYU this season.
Okay.
Because, why? The season begins in less than 100 days.
100 days. Mitch is going to have these same sets of questions. We'll see which ones kind of match up with ours. So, obviously, the number one question is going to be the quarterback situation, which I don't think we're going to get an answer to that until it's 2 days before. Or even, what are the odds of BYU? You don't actually technically know a starter until, as fans, that fans won't know who the starter is until they run out of the locker room.
I 100% think that's exactly
You think
what's
so?
going to happen, yes.
So inside the locker room, they'll know, obviously, maybe 10 days before.
Probably.
Be wrapped up. They'll have to put their game. As soon as the game plan is starting to get put together, they have to, for is it the Salukis? Is Southern Illinois the Salukis?
Yep.
Okay. The Salukis come to town on August 31st. That's game number one. And that's when you're glad you're playing Southern Illinois because you're going, all right, it's going to take a minute because you're not going to announce this guy.
Yeah, you don't want to open against LSU this year. That's for sure.
You didn't want to open against LSU
I was there at that game.
when they open against LSU. Oh, my
It
gosh.
was on my birthday.
I love how you said it like that. That was my birthday. Kalani forgot.
Just not. I mean, it was a weird way to spend my birthday
I know,
watching
it was.
BYU not even past the 50-yard line.
So it's fine because I was doing the pre and post game, and I was just like,
That was a tough one.
because they didn't get past the 50 that day, right?
They did not.
What was the final of that game? Was it 28-0?
21-0?
Or is it 21?
I mean,
Either way, Ed Orgeron and his guys didn't even wake up. They just walked into that game. Was that one supposed to be played in Houston too? It was, right?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
then Hurricane Harvey,
Something like that. 27-0, sorry.
27-0. And yeah,
I stopped watching after the third quarter and I was there.
Did BYU get over 150 yards of offense that game?
I've got the box score right in front of me. I can answer any questions you have about that game because BYU fans want to remember it.
Okay.
Team stats.
I got
BYU total yards 97.
Oh, they didn't even get to 100?
They
Shoot.
did not.
Gosh dang it. All
They
right.
threw for 102 yards, but they had -5 yards
Yeah, of course they did.
rushing.
All right. Aaron Roderick. His offense and him at the helm as the offensive coordinator, I think this is a very crucial year for him. And whether or not he's able to get a quarterback that he feels comfortable with calling his play calls, I wonder how long he's going to be able to pull this off with a kind of a ragtag group of a quarterbacking room that he's got.
This is his biggest challenge, I think, since he's been the offensive coordinator at BYU. If you look back, I mean, you got Zach Wilson to work with.
Jaron Hall.
I mean, he was spoiled with NFL quarterbacks.
Yes.
And it's a good problem to have. But now he's got to figure it out with guys that aren't quite at that level, at least not yet. And he's got to decide which one of those guys is going to help them win the most games. And there's also the thing is, which one of these guys is going to help us win the most games in the future, or who's going to help us win right now? Because he may have to make that decision as well.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty tenuous place to be if you're the coaches at BYU is, okay, if we go with this quarterback, we believe he's going to be the next Zach Wilson, Jaron Hall, Taysom. You know what I mean? Like, he's the next great guy, but he might be a little raw and he might not be ready quite yet to lead us to a winning season in the Big 12. So do you do that, or you just live with the growing pains, knowing that you're in this transition anyway? Or do you go with the guy who you think is going to win the most games this year, even though he may not be here long, or may not be your quarterback even next season, because you expect this other guy to rise up? And I think you know how I'm kind of talking about this right now.
Yeah.
You've got a graduate transfer senior, you got a JUCO transfer, and you've got a incoming sophomore who has a very high ceiling, at least I believe, and who is a newcomer and played some games somewhere else, but didn't play a full season. So there's some different difficult situations here with that Aaron Roderick dealt with last year, but now it's this year again. And does it feel like, I guess the question is, does it feel like there's more pressure, more on the line, more at stake for this coaching staff this year than last? Right?
Yep.
It is this staff actually on the hot seat?
No, not yet. And I say this staff, I think that Kalani Sitake is not on. He's not on the hot seat. Okay, there might be some others, right? Maybe Aaron Roderick is one of those guys where you go, I don't think you're getting enough out of this. Imagine, if you will, to go full Twilight Zone on you in 2 seasons, not this season, but 2025. Because I think this is what the case is going to be. And by the way, by the end of the year, you could see either or both of these guys starting. But you are going to have a 6A state championship rematch between McKay Hillstead and Isaac Wilson when they play each other in Provo in 2025.
Yep.
That's pretty darn cool. Who won that game?
McKay Hillstead.
McKay Hillstead.
But
Isaac Wilson,
Isaac may have outperformed McKay that day.
He maybe did. And the next season, Isaac Wilson reached the top of the mountain and won the state title. So
they both are state championship quarterbacks, and that would be awesome.
How cool would that be?
I think there's a good chance McKay Hillstead is the starting quarterback at BYU by the end of this season. I'm willing to go out on a limb here on the radio.
Any chance week 1?
No.
Okay. All right.
No, I don't think that's enough time. I don't think that. Again, what I just brought up the fact that Aaron Roderick's got to make this decision. What is Coach Roderick more comfortable with right now? Probably going with the more experienced player. Mm-hmm. And I think the guys that he had in spring are the ones he's going to be most comfortable with, because they got to have an understanding or grasping of the offense. Even Gary Bohannon, who came in and played in spring ball, was far behind Retzlaff on the playbook. I mean, it's not fair to ask McKay Hillstead to come in this fall and catch up to those two guys, especially Retzlaff.
Even if he's got the talent.
So right out of the gate, those other guys are going to have the edge.
Okay.
By midseason, depending on how things go with this really tough schedule, good chance you could see McKay Hillstead as a starter by the end of the season.
Let's take a break. We'll come back. We have more to go. In one of the weirdest twists of TV fate, a network that's going to be carrying college football playoff games that you did not have in the cards. We'll tell you about that next, right here, 97.5 the KSL Sports Zone.
And now, a look at traffic from the KSL Traffic Center.
A couple big jams out there that we're dealing with. First off, the D Event Center.
Hero.
I'm a TV junkie.
Can't figure out what to watch or stream today? Let our in-house TV expert give you the best options. It's JJ's TV Guide.
Welcome back. It is 97.5 the KSL Sports Zone. Alex Curie, Jeremiah Jensen, yes, our in-house TV expert. You know how I know that? He's on TV.
20 years in the business.
Come on, man. I saw this one and I thought, man, this is something to run past JJ here. TNT Sports. If the John Tesh telling you he's redoing Round Ball Rock for NBC, I love how he was like, well, they're actually looking at us doing it for the Olympics. It's like, well, okay. And other stuff, like what it was actually used for. So, here we go. If it wasn't enough that they're redoing Round Ball Rock for NBC to know that NBC's probably going to get the NBA, how about this one as a tell? TNT Sports, being reported today, it's going to present 2 first-round college football playoff games. And then, in addition to the first-round games they're going to be covering, TNT is also going to add 2 quarterfinal games each year, beginning with the 2026 season through 2028. So they had some money to burn because they don't have that money that they're throwing at the NBA.
Exactly.
TNT, we're going to be watching college football playoff games on TNT.
And NBA on NBC again.
We're all turned upside down. I can't even imagine what who's a TNT college football crew they're going to put together?
How about a Kevin Harlan crew? How about an Ian Eagle?
Ooh, I like both those guys. In fact, it's like a warm blanket when you hear Kevin Harlan's call. Same thing with Ian Eagle. Awesome, right? So
I think it's going to be great.
In my mind, the thing is I just don't know, like, are they going to have a that's what Chuck and Ernie and Shaq and Kenny can do now. If they're not going to be moving over to ESPN, or if they're not going to be moving over to
So you're saying have the NBA on TNT crew do college football playoff instead of NBA?
Yeah.
Well,
saying these kids got to go out there, they got to have a little bit more heart. Like,
they did March
do that stuff
Madness and
together.
didn't know anything about those teams and games, so why not?
I like this Utah State squad. They're tough. It's like, what? Come on, man. So there you go. I don't know. I mean, when you start doing stuff like this, JJ, it's kind of crazy because TNT has not been in the college football game, and suddenly now they're going to be covering and carrying college football playoff games, the biggest ones of the year.
Pretty crazy. They sub-licensed those games from ESPN, 2024 and 2025, and then that's for first-round games, and then 2 quarterfinal games each year beginning with the 2026 through 28 seasons.
Fun.
TNT, you're home for the college football playoff. Who knew?
By the way, they just put up a big old stat on the screen. That's mean. That was very mean. They put Texas franchises, basically Dallas franchises, and the last time they were in conference finals, like how many seasons since they were last in the conference finals, is basically everyone's like 0 except for the Cowboys is 28. But they made a freaking bar graph out of it, so everybody had nothing, and then the Cowboys had this long tail in 28 seasons.
America's team.
Of course it is. We'll take a break. We'll come back. More to go. David Locke, voice of the Utah Jazz, going to join us. Man, if there's a guy who loves the NBA playoffs, especially about to crown a 6th champion in 6 seasons, David Locke going to join us next. We'll talk about that Pacers versus Celtics series. Of course, the Mavericks firing up tonight against the Timberwolves. We'll chat about all those things with David Locke next right here at 97.5 the KSL Sports Zone.